I see some of the guest speakers have already gone in terms of the PS. I'm sure he was also running behind time, so he could make his presentation. All the same, if we could quickly settle down, our session is for us to interrogate the 2023 State of Industry and Commerce Survey results. And if I could have on the floor, Mr. Denford Nema, Director of Industrial Development, Minister of Industry and Commerce. Thank you, Mr. Nema. And if I could have Mr. Macheka Machumairi, is the Director of Quality Assurance, Minister of Industry and Commerce. Thank you. And if I could have Mr. Ephraim Chaoneka, Managing Director for STF Capital. Chaoneka, please. Why is still out? He's coming. Thank you. And if I could have Ms. Fernandez, Country Manager, World Bank of Zimbabwe. Ms. Fernandez. And lastly, but not least, my sister Sarah Moyo, Senior Partner at Hanen Blackenberg. Thank you, Mr. Chaoneka. If you could come straight. Oh, sorry, sir. I'm sure my name has already been introduced. I'm Peter Kadzere, and I'm CEO at SmartVest Wealth Managers, a fund management outfit. And my task really is to moderate this session. And I'm sure to a very large extent, a lot of work has been done for us by Professor Makochekana in terms of outlining what happened in terms of the survey which he undertook on behalf of ZNCC, which survey was done in the periods of just before the elections to October, and where we had like 2,400, and we had responses of about 85, which was 2,030 respondents. So it's just to put it into context so that what we inputted into that survey could really be a representation of the industry. So in terms of time, we're fairly constrained, and the Master of Ceremony has really changed that we now need to run this through in about 15 minutes so that we are able to catch up on account of time. So we'll try to be very tight in terms of that. So to get us to get going and be able to keep to the time, I'll allow the panelists to just say in 2 to 3 minutes a little bit in terms of the observations on the survey that has been deliberated in detail through the presentation from Professor Makochekana, and obviously they now have copies of the survey. So to kickstart, maybe him is nearest, Mr. Ephraim Chaoneka. If you could just in 2 to 3 minutes, say a few minutes.
Thank you, Peter. I think my observation is drawn to the table that speaks about low capacity utilization, and more specifically, the lack. One of the key reasons being the lack of adequate skills as a factor that is affecting low capacity utilization. When I compare that with the capacity utilization increase in education from 55% in 2022 to 65% in 2023, there seems to be a misnomer there. We are basically saying industry, the interpretation, of lack of skills. We're basically saying industry is yearning for skills. And on the other hand, we are basically saying there's been an increase in the number of graduates. I think we are basically in the period of graduations right now, and you can tell the number of thousands of students that are being churned out of our universities. Now the question is there a disconnect between the industry needs in terms of skills and the type of students that are coming out of our universities? If there is, what is being done to bridge that gap? And also, is there any communication lines between industrial needs, to the Ministry of Tertiary? If the PEMSEC was here, probably I was going to talk about, Ministry of Industry and Trade versus Ministry of Education, or that of tertiary education, whether there is communication. Because clearly from these results, it seems like, yes, we are producing the graduates, but we are probably producing the wrong graduate, so to speak. And that's why lack of skills is featuring prominently, as a factor. The other observation that I saw, which obviously speaks to what I would probably call omissions on the budget, is basically the issue of power outages. In as much as the budget has dwelled so much on taxes, I did not see a deliberate shift, towards putting resources towards the power issue. If you look at that graph again, the issue of power outages, and this is even more compounded when you factor in, the effects of the anticipated El Nino. Obviously, that has got a direct impact, on our hydro generation. Yes, granted, part of the water that we use for generation does not necessarily, come from Zim, but the fact that El Nino is affecting the larger part of the Southern Africa, obviously speaks volumes. And when you take that in the context of the taxes that have been introduced on fuel, again, the cost build-up, the inflationary pressures that are likely to be faced by industry going into 2024, the outlook seems a little bit of concern. Then my last observation is on the issue of taxes. Where do you apply your tax? On the issuance of the invoice or on receipt of payment? Obviously, the current regime and what is sitting in the budget is that they collect on the face of the invoice. But when that is now put in the context of delayed payments, business is likely to pay a price. And more so that businesses can be closed, on tax issues. It's an area that we probably really need to place, our minds on. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Ephraim. And my panelists, if you see me stand, your time is up. Just for purposes of checking on our time. Thank you. I'll then ask Sarah to just give us a few comments. Thank you, Sarah.
All right. Thank you, Peter. And good afternoon, or is it still morning, ladies and gentlemen. As a lawyer in private practice, I think my interest with this business survey was with respect to the issue of corruption as being one of the major hindrances to the ease of doing business. And this, for me, is coupled with the challenges that our business sector has in running their operations. I think that because we have regulatory requirements which are so onerous, which are so expensive, and whose costing is sometimes not even easy to fathom as to why particular regulatory bodies have the cost structures that they have. I think this is what is feeding into the corruption that we see in the country. And obviously the fact that some of our institutions are regarded rightly or wrongly by the business community as not being independent. So even where there are complaints made by bad actors in those institutions, sometimes business people are not able to create redress. So I think one of the issues that as the business sector we would be looking to have is to have a more a greater emphasis on e-government, which would result in lesser human intervention, because we believe that as a business community, when you have processes which are online, which do not require your business executives or business people to be coming to a central place to get their permits and so forth, you have less room for corruption. But I think the main thing is that we need independent institutions which are able to investigate areas of concern and complaint by business people. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you, Sarah, and thank you for bringing up that issue of corruption, why the governor could not understand why that factor of corruption had come into play, but as well, the Prof explained it very well. Thank you. And our next panelist, Ms. Fernandez from the World Bank, if you could come through. Thank you.
Thank you very much. First, just to say that my name is Fernandez. I had my name joined with the UNDP head, so I'm honored today to represent the bank and our sister UNDP here today, but it is Fernandez. So first, I really wanted, I'm brand new to the country. I arrived 8 weeks ago, so very happy to be here and very happy to have listened to the discussions that were held earlier today. My background in the bank comes from the private sector, and it's my belief, but also the belief of our new president of the World Bank, that the private sector is really at the center of, development in countries. So I really wanted to congratulate the private sector and ZNCC for the work that was presented today. I've worked in private sector in many countries, and it's not very common to find such a detailed survey, such well-written survey, and with such a high response rate. So really kudos to the private sector. A lot of times it's very hard for us to support private sector because the private sector does not understand the constraints and doesn't know what they need. And in the case of Zimbabwe, it's clearly a different ballgame. So you guys have very clearly identified the constraints. You have monitored the constraints in terms of improvement, and it is really clearly out there. So congratulations. The other thing that I want to say is that the World Bank has worked recently on two important studies that are linked to the private sector. The private sector diagnostic, and I know some of you have participated in some of the consultations, but also our climate development report, which is the way the bank looks at development going forward and the economic impact of loss through climate change, but also the role of the private sector. And a lot of the things that have been identified in the survey are really closely related to those two reports. So I think that I have no major point on what to add, just two quick points. First, on energy, I think that there is a real impact on the private sector, and we're presenting our country economic memorandum next Wednesday, and you're all invited to come, same place in the morning. And we've identified that the loss to GDP of the energy sector of the country is around 5.6%. So I think that point has to be really highlighted, and infrastructure. And one of the things that I noticed that your report does not mention, your survey, is the the infrastructure on digital. So you talked about digitalization and e-governance, but also digital infrastructure is something that I think could also be highlighted more in understanding what the impact of digital is to the private sector. But thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Fernandez. The issue of energy remains very topical for industry. Our next speaker, Engineer Macheka Muchumairi. Over to you, Engineer.
Okay, thank you, Peter, and good morning / afternoon. Okay, so basically what we are interested in from the report, the few minutes that we've been able to go through it, and it's basically the wholesale and retail aspect of it, where it has basically reinforced the assumptions that we have had that the wholesale and retail sector is really contributing a lot to the GDP of the nation. And we have seen this through a lot of malls that have been built, some of them funded by diaspora remittances that were mentioned earlier by the governor. So what we have done as a ministry is to then give due recognition to this sector. And I'm sure you have heard of the industrial development policy, which is in the process of being crafted. So we have also kickstarted the policy frameworks towards wholesale and retail policy formulation. So that is what we are working on. And so what you have given us just reinforces that we are on the right path. And because of time, I'll also touch on informalization. The Professor Albert, they mentioned that we need to have a two-pronged approach in terms of interpreting what informalization is. And we are very grateful for those remarks. And we have since established interministerial committees that seek to define what we call informal sector, and we have also put some measures to try and at least regularize those sectors that we at the moment are considering to be informal, so that they line up with what we consider to be the formal sector, because we definitely want a situation where we do not destroy that sector, but rather we want to propel it and, in a sense, make it useful to the nation in terms of productivity, in terms of revenue contributions to the fiscus. So those the policy directions that we have currently taken regarding the informal sector. So that has been a multi-stakeholder approach, and we are starting to bear some results, and we hope that this formal sector that had been in existence for so long is also safeguarded, but at the same time, the so-called informal sector is also given room to regularize their operations. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Engineer. If I could then move on to Dave Ford. I'm sure he will also speak more on the enabling environment the ministry might be putting together for the industry. Gaylord, over to you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, all protocol observed. Thank you so much. As for me, you understand Minister of Industry and Commerce is responsible for industrialization of the country. And if we start to see indicators of economic activity going down and so forth, we become worried. Maybe we are all aware. In the morning, I think we were talking about the various challenges that are facing the world, including Zimbabwe, that range from the social inequalities, the conflicts, and the climate change.
Back power? Okay.
The theme is, I wanted to change the theme a bit so that it fits the realities that we are facing. To read, turning challenges into innovative solutions for Industry and Commerce in future or by 2030. Why I'm saying so? Because we've seen capacity utilization going down, manufacturing sector growth also going down, and other informalities going up, etc. So my take will be, how should we address all these issues so that we remain with the economy that is thriving? In other words, the economy that is creating jobs, because that's the major issue why the Ministry of Industry is there. We want to create jobs. We want to create revenue through the corporate taxes and so forth. So localization of our God-given production will be very key here. I'm sure Professor Chakravarti has talked about that. So the ministry is seized with changing, what we call amending the ZNIDP, in other words, reviewing it so that it suits the current realities where we are pushing forward rural industrialization so that we touch the lives of the people that are in the background, so that we move as an economy, and also to address the SDGs. Remember, we are all rallying towards the SDGs, the whole world. So this is the ministry that will be looking at all these SDGs, 1 to 5, they affect the Ministry of Industry and Commerce. So we are happy that ZNCC is collaborating, the business community is collaborating with the ministry, and we'll be happy to receive the 3 documents which Professor Chakravarti has talked about, so that we prepare a very good document for the nation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Daylord. I'm sure, Master of Ceremonies, we should be doing well in terms of time. So just allow me a few more minutes to maybe ask for 3 questions from the floor. If you'd want to question or make a few comments to this very nice report. Yes, sir. Introduce yourself.
Thank you very much. Polytechnic. My is to do with lack of skill as required by industry. I think NAMACO do more in terms of advisory into the curriculum in polytechnics, so that the polytechnics can produce the rightful graduates. You talked about wrong graduates. It is because that interaction between NAMACO and the CRADO in terms of curriculum development is probably needs improvement. And then I'm glad to see Engineer and Ms. Chinema there representing Evans. I think I had a talk with the President that in terms of challenges in ease of doing business, we can talk, but the issue is we need to feed the cow that produces the milk. And the cow that is producing the milk for the industry today are the civil servants. But instead of creating an enabling environment, what the government does is it goes on to burden further the civil servant, who is the main customer for all of us here. We have our cement, we have our... And the currents has been eroded, the ZWL has been eroded. So it's like the civil servants are just going to see to work just to spend time there.
Okay, thank you. Any other comment from the floor? If none, thank you very much. Maybe what I would just want to draw the House to is the recommendations which are on page 45 and 46 of the report. I'm sure those are key, and it's really what we're recommending as well to the authorities in terms of how we should be proceeding. I think that really summarizes our findings of the report. Thank you very much, and if you could give a big round of applause to the participants here. Thank you. Thank you, colleagues. Over to you, back our MC.
A big round of applause for the panelists of that session. We move on with our program. If anybody hasn't received this copy, please talk to the Secretariat. They've got these copies for you. Thank you very much. Let me invite at this stage the moderator for the next session, Mr. Amio Matindike. Then on the panelists, I haven't seen Mr. Gwanyanya. Let me invite the President of Zambia Chamber of Commerce and Industry, Mr. Kabaye, Professor Tony Hawkins, Mr. Carlos, and Dr. Gadzikwa. Okay. Let's put our hands together for them as they are coming, and I hand over to Mr. Martin.
Good afternoon, everyone. I will just say I will write on the protocols that has been observed and also protocols from the previous moderator. So to my panelists, if you see me coming here, it means your 3 minutes is up.